Hello everyone. So we are live again for another author live chat with fans series. Tuesday series, your next page turner, 11th January 2022, 8 p.m. CST. We're live again on Facebook page. And today we have author Pete O'Donnell. I hope I got the name right. To talk about his fiction books. And the topic for today is the survival of characters in a bizarre place full of secrets. So, a little bit about the author. He's the creator and writer of the children's story website at um, illaadvisedstories.com, where kids can listen to free and funny adventures. He is a graduate of Queen's University and a member of the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. He works as a firefighter and an EMT and has a deep interest in history. The Curse of Purgatory Cove is his first book. It started as a short story when he was a kid, but after reading about the pirate ship Whydah, he recovered with its treasure of Cape Cod. His short story about a paperboy became something more. So I believe it all started with short stories, and without further ado, let's welcome author Pete to the show. I hope that I'm getting the name right. Hello there.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
We're cold up here in New England tonight. It is freezing out. We are Arctic today. What's the temperature like where you are right now?
I am. It is Wednesday morning where I'm right now. It's 10 o'clock in the morning, so we are like kind of like worlds apart. And it's probably about 20 something degrees Celsius over here, and it's like it's tropical weather where I'm right now. So we are literally worlds apart, like in terms of weather, in terms of time zone. So we are literally like worlds apart. But I'm glad that we have technology connecting us today, and I'm so happy to have you here on the show. I hope that I got your name right. Um, so I actually briefly introduced yourself to the audience earlier, but I think it'd be great to have you say a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So the website was illadvisedstories.com, and what that is it's a place where kids can go and listen to stories for free. They're mostly funny stories, and they're for younger kids.
Mhm.
The book I'm here promoting is The Stars Beyond the Mesa, which is a new science fiction
Mhm.
story, which is young adult. So it's for a much older audience than the stories for ill-advised stories. As a writer, I'm kind of all over the place as far as what I like to write. Um, like you said,
Mhm.
my first book was The Curse of Purgatory Cove, which was set right here in New England, and it's at one time, this area where I live, just south of Boston, was a hotbed for piracy. It's where they would come and they would trade their goods after they left the Caribbean. So that was the origin of that story, and that's a middle grade novel, and that won actually the Royal Dragonfly Award for Best New Author. But like I said, the one I'm excited right now about is the new science fiction series, which the first book is the Stars Beyond the Mesa, and then the second book, I'm sorry, was the Ocean Beyond, which there's the poster for it right there. I dropped it. Perfect. So that's the poster for it there. Um, so it's sort of an
Yes,
exciting adventure story that is going to unfold over a series of 7 books. So I'm very excited to write it.
awesome. Right. So a little bit about your background, where you're from, and what you do. For a living, and maybe a little background of yourself.
So I live in Rhode Island, which is the smallest of all the U.S. states, but with the biggest attitude. Like I said, we're just south of Boston. We're an hour south of Boston and 3 hours north of New York. So right in that
Mhm.
area of the country that's highly populated by the shore. And in the
Mhm.
winter, we have rough winters, so it's a good time to read a good book. So and write a good book, which
Mhm.
has been a lifelong pursuit of mine. Even though my main job is as a firefighter and EMT here in the
Mhm.
area.
Yes, uh-huh. And I see that you have a full-time job and you love writing books. And it all started from the short story that you wrote some time ago and then, became something more. So tell us a little bit about your writing journey, when did it, start, and why do you choose to write these stories, where the inspiration came from?
Well, so the first story, like I said, the Curse of Purgatory Cove, it started out as a short story, but I wrote a lot of stories as a novel. Um, I always thought that's a good way for a writer to begin, is to write short stories because it teaches you how to complete a story.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime you write something, if you don't
Mm-hmm.
stick the landing, if you don't come to a satisfactory conclusion for the reader, you can write the
Mm-hmm.
greatest story in the world, but if you don't have a great ending, it was pointless. And I think not pointless necessarily, but so the short stories are really where I tried to cut my teeth as a writer. Now, The Curse of Purgatory
Mm-hmm.
Cove, my first novel, I started that not too long after I finished college, which so like 22, something,
Mm.
and it probably took me another 15, 16 years to take that through all its drafts and finally have something I was ready to put out in the world. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and as you can see, it's done pretty well. It won that one award, so I was pretty happy with that. And I
Mm-hmm.
really, when I write something, I want to deliver something that a reader is going to enjoy. And one of my favorite things is when a kid has picked the book up and they've read it and they come up to me and they see me again and they tell me how much they enjoyed it. I like hearing from readers, you know, um, when they've gotten into the stories.
Mm. Right. And this is your first book, the one that I'm actually displaying over here on screen.
Yep.
And you got actually talked to the reviewer who actually rated you 5 stars. So that is definitely, and I think it's written over here. This book is actually two stories in one, and it's about Tom's parents getting divorced, and his goals and wish is to see his father. And it's a 300-page plus book chapter, and I think it's pretty lengthy, and you still manage to keep it really engaging. So wow, so that's really inspiring. I think reading about your book over here, the blurb, we can see that it involves some mysteries and adventure. So, do you have any authors who have been like your inspiration? And the books that you enjoy reading as a writer.
So I read very wide. Like I read, I'll pick up anything if I've heard good things about it. But so some of the magical elements in this there's a lot of actual history built into the Curse of Purgatory Cove. But there's also a few magical
Mhm.
elements. But I tried to get them to where one of the things that kind of drives me nuts when you're reading a story that's got magic
Mhm.
in it is when people feel an urge to explain every detail of the magic.
Mhm.
Obviously, with
Mhm.
the Harry Potter books, that's fine and that works great. But I think when people try to create these
Mhm.
systems of magic that have rules, I find that kind of boring. So the
Mhm.
writer that I really enjoy when he touches on magic and everything he touches is magic is Neil Gaiman, the guy that wrote American Gods and so many other great books. And he wrote the Sandman series as a series of graphic novels. And I recommend Neil Gaiman to anybody. So he really kind of inspired a lot of that storytelling of the magic side of it. But also, there's a lot of actual history in there. Like I said, there's an author named Morgan Lilwyn who she novelized a lot of Irish mythology, and I consumed all of her books as a young man. And then, even though I'm American, my ancestry is full-blooded Irish, so I've always been fascinated by Irish history. So the pirate in this story is Irish, and it goes over how he chose to become chose the life of piracy, because for a lot of sailors back then, it was a really rough life. It was awful, and the pirate culture. A lot of people don't realize, just like they were kind of like functioning democracies on water. Everybody had a vote. The captain was only really in charge during battle. So it was interesting, and I read so many books on piracy, on nautical books. But like I said, in the blurb, the story that really inspired it was a ship that crashed off of Cape Cod called the Whydah, and it was at the time it was the largest pirate treasure that had ever been recovered, and they actually kept the treasure together, and it's up there in a museum on Cape Cod, about 45 minutes from my house. So it was kind of neat. And then also the town that I work in and the town I grew up next to, you always heard rumors about tunnels under these old colonial houses where the pirates used to hide their treasure. Now, I've never seen them, but it made for an interesting part of the story, and that's sort of what inspired it.
Okay. I actually wanted to ask you about Harry Potter, because we when we talk about magic, I think Harry Potter is just one of those books that will definitely come across your mind. And it's interesting to see that you have taken a different route, or probably you see magic, or writing stories with magic from a different perspective, and you don't want to stick to the sort of rules pertaining to magic books with magic source books, right? So and I think with that, I believe you've had like a lot of people reading your books. And what is one of the most memorable feedback you've ever gotten from those who have read your book so far?
One of the most memorable scenes. I'm sorry, I missed the end of the question.
What is the most memorable feedback that you've gotten from those who have read your book?
Well, so it's funny. There's a restaurant near our house that we go into quite a bit, and one of the people that works there, he said that his nephew doesn't like to read, but they were nice enough to put the book up on the shelf there, and he said that his nephew actually picked the Curse of Purgatory Cove up and read it from cover to cover. So for a kid that didn't like to read, to pick it up and have it to be interesting enough for them to carry all the way through, I think that's a win all the time. That's anything that gets a kid to finish a book, I think, is just wonderful.
Fantastic. And now we have this second book of yours, I believe, and this is the Stars Beyond the Method, right? So is this the second book that you wrote, I believe?
What's that?
Is this the second book that you wrote?
So it's the second book I've released. I've got other novels that I'll be coming out with, and actually I snuck one in between the Curse of Purgatory Cove and the Stars Beyond the Mesa, a book called The Adventures of Sparky and Spazzoid. That's it right there. Which this actually became part of the podcast, part of Ill-Advised Stories. So this entire novel is actually on there, and kids can read it and read along with it. So that's the whole idea. So basically, the audio for this is free, on my website,
Mhm.
and then they can buy the book. And for kids that are reluctant readers, they can pick it up and follow the story. So that's middle grade as well, and it's kind of a zany
Mhm.
story. But like I said, the Stars Beyond the Mesa is kind of the big project that I'm working on. Like I'm deep into the third book in the series now, and those are going to be young
Mhm.
adult. And it's a series of books to where all 7 of the books are already not plotted out completely, but the whole series is planned out, and it's sort of a puzzle box to where it's funny because as I'm in the third book now writing it, I'm finally at a
Mhm.
point where I can start revealing some of the secrets that I lay the groundwork for in that first book.
Mhm.
So it's very exciting for me, like to finally get to pay off some of this stuff as it goes along.
Awesome. All right. And here we have your yeah, the last book. I think that you have put it up over here, which is now available for pre-order, right?
No, that's actually live now. You can get it right now.
Awesome, awesome. So yeah, because I saw on the website it says that it's available for pre-order. Where I think you've already released this book. It's available on Amazon, and so this should be the latest one from you, right? And tell us a little bit about this book, the latest one that you have it over here.
So the tricky part, of course, is to tell you about the second book without telling you too much about the first book.
Mm-hmm.
But the 5 characters in the first book find themselves in a place far from home, in a distant star system, surrounded
Mm-hmm.
by alien creatures, um, one of which is on the cover there. Different life forms. There's people there as well, which one of the mysteries to solve is how those people ended up there. And
Mm-hmm.
they're basically, as what happens at the end of the first book, some of the characters that are in the story want to try to fix that and try to get back to where they were. Other characters are more concerned with simply surviving, which it's a dangerous world. They arrive at a
Mm-hmm.
place called Nalanda Station, which is it's a school sort of on an asteroid that's circling a massive gas giant, and it's a place where different noble families go to have their children educated. So it's sort of like at one point the character Amita, she actually calls it Hogwarts in space because she's really sarcastic. So you know, which is
Mm-hmm.
fun for me to write her. She's my favorite character to write because she's very intelligent and she's kind of she's very smart and she lets you know. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
of the 5 characters, she's my favorite. So.
Awesome. Right. And talking about characters, talking about all these exciting characters in the book, where do you actually draw your inspiration from? Like, how do you come up with these characters?
So there's 5 characters in the book. Like I said, there's 2 brothers, Alex and Chris. Alex and Chris have a very similar relationship to myself and my brother. I have an older brother who, he was always very like focused, and he was military focused. That's what he wanted more than anything else. And the brother Chris, who is probably in the first book kind of my point of view character. I try to give all the characters a little bit of time, but he's certainly the one that I spend the most time with because he's the one I identify with the most. Um, so he was important to me because he's a large part of who I am. But then, like I said, so a character like Anita, who is probably, while she's the most fun to write, she's also sometimes the most difficult because she's supposed to be smarter than everybody else. When you're the writer, it's easy to make a character smarter because you know what's going to happen. So when Anita figures something
Uh-huh.
out, but you have to backtrack it. It's like writing a Sherlock Holmes story to where like the end, so you can explain how your character got there. and Amita has that kind of mind. Luckily, I'm married to a very smart woman, so she certainly inspired quite a bit of Amita. And then the two other characters, Ben, who is the comedic character, which is, to be honest, writing a comedic character sometimes, especially a teenage boy, you're always walking a tightrope of, is this funny or is this annoying? You know, and Ben certainly crosses that line sometimes. But you know, another part of the story that was important to me was to have a certain amount of diversity in it. So Chris and Alex are mixed race, so their mother is white, but their father is black. Amita is actually South Asian, so she's from England, but she's of Indian descent. So she's, you know, to have, and then like even within with Ben, the younger brother, he's got ADHD, which you know, attention deficit, so which is something that, you know, I've dealt with a little bit, and like sometimes when people write characters like that, they don't always get it. I'm not saying I got it right, but I feel like I have enough experience with it to where, like, when Ben gets himself in trouble, the younger brother character, it follows a certain logic that I sort of understand. And then the main character in the book, or at least the first character that meets the monster in the desert, is a character named Katie, who's a very pretty girl, which I kind of want to, as the series goes on, I want to play with the trope of the pretty girl, to where you often find that people write these characters, but they don't always like go into the depth about them. They don't give them intelligence. They don't give them agency the way, you know, they turn them into superheroes, but not necessarily real people, which I wanted to avoid the tropes in these characters of having the chosen one, or having somebody that's so special that they obviously can't be risked as a character. So it was important for me, for each one of these characters, as you read them, there's real risk there, because you know they're not the one that's there to fulfill a prophecy or something like that. I want you to understand that when these characters are changed, when things happen to them, they don't get to go back. Do you know what I mean? So something happens to Katie in the first book to where she loses her eyesight, and in the second book, she's trying to get it back. And in the third book, she's the main character in, and she's dealing with that. So it's interesting to me, because now she has a disability as well, to write from her point of view. You know, it's interesting because I've done a lot of research into the way in which I didn't want to write a Daredevil type character to where it's like they've got supernatural powers or something like that, but write a character as in, if somebody actually did lose their sight in this way, how would they compensate? You know, so it's important for me for these characters to have, you know, that touch of reality to them. And to be honest, as the series goes on, I can't guarantee they're all going to make it to the end. So, you know.
Right, and I am actually displaying the website, which is the illadvisedstories.com, and you can see a lot of audios over here for each one of the chapters. And I think this is what you were mentioning earlier on, that is this part of the episodes, the podcast?
Yep. So each one of those, well, so Sparky and Spazzoid is on there. There's 19 chapters in that book, and each chapter is on there. But then also on there are a number of short stories. There's something like 30 short stories that kids can listen to. So, you know, there's holiday stories, there's characters that come back. And basically what happens is I recorded them with my kids, so they played the different characters. And then I added sound effects, and I added music to it and whatnot. So it was kind of fun. You know, it was a little project we had going for about 2 years. At some point, I want to go back and actually put all these stories into like a volume, into a collection. You know, because they started out as bedtime stories for my kids. You know, the very first one I wrote for So the very first one I wrote because we were reading The Wizard of Oz. My daughters and I were reading The Wizard of Oz, and I had an idea for a
Mm-hmm.
short story called Anna and Nugget, which is the first story that I wrote. And then, of course, after I wrote Anna and Nugget, my daughter Riley wanted a story as well because my older daughter's name is Anna and my younger daughter's name is Riley. So at the time, there was a
Mm-hmm.
bear that was wandering our state, like a wild bear. So I wrote a whole story about Riley the bear because that was actually Riley's nickname was Riley Bear because she was a baby at the time, like she was like 3, and she had this terrible temper, so we call her Riley the bear. So I wrote the short story for her, but then I was having so much fun writing these short stories for them because like when you tell your kids a story, you have an audience right there to listen, you know? And
Mm-hmm.
if
Mm-hmm.
they don't laugh, if it doesn't hold their attention, if you can't hold a 7-year-old's attention and a 5-year-old or whatever age they were at, the story's not good, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So when you have that live interaction with my kids as the audience, if they laugh, it was a good story. So then it made the podcast. If they didn't laugh, then it went in a folder and got worked on some more. So, you know, and certainly all the stories on the podcast are meant to be funny. Like they're all humor. So
Mm-hmm. And coming to your podcast now, I mean, like, are there an existing audience who, like kids who come to your website to listen to the audio stories? And apart from your kids, like, we now know that, your kids actually enjoy it, but apart from that, have they ever told about this project to their friends, and any interesting feedback that you've gotten?
well, so I have gotten to I've gotten to do some school visits with it, which was fun. To where I kind of talk to the kids about it and show them how I do the drawings and whatnot. But so I had the idea to create it as a podcast completely in a bubble without even knowing this. But it turns out that there's an entire community of people out there called Kids Listen that have these
Mm-hmm.
wonderful podcasts for kids to listen to. And honestly, some of them I think are better than mine because
Mm-hmm.
they have these great science ones. They have wonderful history ones. It's a group called Kids Listen. They have their own app and everything like that, so you can actually go there and they're a
Mm-hmm.
great supportive community. Some of them have radio shows that are just on broadcast radio and then they record them as the podcasts. But some of them make these
Mm-hmm.
amazing first productions, which we've enjoyed them in the car, you know, and it was great too,
Mm-hmm.
especially when I was starting out because it gave me a chance to have people to talk to about it, you know, to ask questions, and it came with an audience
Mm-hmm.
because it was based on their app. So right out the gate,
Mm-hmm.
the short stories already had people looking to listen to them. So you know,
Awesome, right. So here is the website,
yep.
and so we can see over here that they can actually, I mean, people can actually get a free copy and begin the adventure. So, what exactly is the free copy that we are looking at over here? Is it the free chapter?
So yeah, so they can go to it's free on Amazon, or they can follow that link, and it'll take them to um, the
Mm-hmm.
draft to digital link where they can get a free copy of it, free, and then it's also pretty much on most major ebook platforms like Apple Books, the
Mm-hmm.
Nook, all those places. So the first one in the series is free for anybody that wants to check it out. So they can download it, give it a read if they get into it. And then actually, if you scroll back down, there's a character guide. So if they join my mailing list, they can get a character guide and actually see some
Mm-hmm.
drawings of the characters I did. So
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes, so this is where they're supposed to click on it and join the mailing list to get the free character guide. So, free character guide, I believe that it's mainly going to be about the 5 characters that you were talking about.
yep, and then also so it's got a lot of concept drawings for the second book because there's a number of different alien
Mm-hmm.
races in the second book. So it'll give people a chance to sort. Yeah, there are my girls right there. That was
Mm-hmm.
That was the stair climb, the firefighter stair climb, where we went up like a sky rise tower where I had my full gear on. That's one of my favorite pictures. And my daughter's got the Camp
Mhm.
Half-Blood shirt on her because she's a big Rick Royden fan. So she likes Percy Jackson. She's a lot older now. That was like
Mhm.
5 or 6 years ago. So
Mhm. Right, and so here's the books, the list of the books that you've gotten. You have you're the winner of this book of yours is the winner of the 2019 Royal Dragonfly Award for Best New Author. Wow! So I believe you ended a contest
yeah,
in 2019.
yeah, it was from Story Monster magazine, which is a magazine that goes out to all the libraries that lists all the new publications for kids. So
Mhm. Ah, fantastic. And so this is the magazine, right? I mean, this is the Spark and Spazzoid photos roll.
yep, that's the one. That's the one that's part of the website. So
Photos, yes. Uh-huh.
yeah, so they can listen
And
to
this
it,
is
they can read along with it, and then I did all the illustrations inside the book too. So the Adventures of Sparky.
Woo!
Yeah, so I draw too. So all the drawings that are on the website, if you go back to the first story and scroll through the ill-advised stories, you'll see how I got better over the years. But so all the drawings that are in the Curse of Purgatory Cove and all the drawings that are in Sparky and Spazzoid, that's all me. The covers I
Mhm.
didn't do. I'm not there yet. So.
So the covers too. I mean, for all the books, you do the cover as well, right?
No, no, the covers I outsource. The covers I hire artists for. So the Curse of Purgatory Cove went through a publisher called Stillwater Press, which is a
Mhm.
small
Mhm.
press here in Rhode Island,
Mhm.
and so they hired the artist for that one, and then Sparky and Spazzoid was the first one that was truly self-published. That I
Mhm.
actually met somebody at an art class, and they're the ones that did the cover for that, and I think it came out great. I'm
Mhm.
very happy with it. And then the
Mhm.
covers for the two books in the science fiction series was done by MLB Art, not MLB, Um, it's a company that does book covers out of Eastern Europe. So,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
think they did an amazing job.
They look really amazing. I mean, they look really clean, sleek, and I think the covers actually fit the genre. I think so that they really look great. And I have to say that even the font of the book covers it's similar, and it sort of like gives it looks very harmonious, like from one book cover to another. It looks really it's in sync. All the covers are in sync with one another. So, but yeah, you mentioned about self-publishing, and you mentioned about getting it traditionally published, right? So, which one of it is easier, and what was the process like for you?
So, I personally prefer the self publishing thing, simply
Mhm.
because it's one, as you work on the books and you put them out there, as you build your audience,
Mhm.
it's a better return for you, and you're in control of everything,
Mhm.
which is
Mhm.
kind of fun. I think it's a little bit more punk rock, to where when you're working with a publisher, I think there's certain things that you know you don't have as much control over. So
Mhm. Mhm.
I definitely prefer just playing this game to where it's just you're it, especially
Mhm.
'cause there's so many
Mhm.
large communities out there now too that can help you along. But I mean,
Mhm.
it's also a question of making sure that you're releasing the product that you're promising people. Like when they hear that it's going to be this kind of story, that's important.
Mhm. Mhm. And self-publishing, I mean, the greatest challenge that comes along with self-publishing is branding and also marketing. So, what are the efforts like, in terms of branding and in terms of putting yourself out there, so that the right audience can actually see you, right? I think this is the greatest challenge a writer can actually come across. So how are you dealing with that, and what are the things that you've learned along the way?
So I use Amazon ads quite a bit, which that's an investment that hopefully will show a return as time goes on. Putting out the first book as a free download, I think that's gone very well. I mean, there's been a few days where the book went out over 1,000 times, and
Mm-hmm.
hopefully the readers will enjoy the story enough to where they'll want to see what happens in the second one. I'm also very lucky in my state of Rhode Island is that we have a group called the Association of Rhode Island Authors, and they do a lot of events. So for instance, we had tables at Comic Cons and things like that. So you get to go out there, and I spent the whole weekend at the Rhode Island Comic Con, and then other members of the group, they'll go down to Florida and they'll travel around the country to these different cons. It's usually the people that do more genre stuff like myself, but they have a good time doing it, and it really gives you a chance to get your work out there and to talk to people. They also set up smaller events, like in the past, Providence, which is the capital of Rhode Island, would do a big Pride festival. And you'd go down there for the parade and stuff like that, and the ARIA authors would have a booth, and they, people could come by, and it was like a big celebration. Obviously, with COVID, a lot of these things have gone away, but hopefully, as we return to a more healthy society, they'll come back. There's also us being so close to Boston and to New York, it gives us an opportunity to go out. But yet again, we have to get through what's going on with the pandemic, and then hopefully we can go out and sell some more books.
Exactly. I mean, I think we really need to get back to our normal life. I mean, like we call it new normal, but I don't think so. The new normal is what everyone is looking forward to, because I think we are social animals, and we are really wired for connection, and we just need face-to-face connection, and this is probably about 2 years now. It's close to 2 years, and it feels, forever. It feels like it has been there for like, 2 decades or so. So let's just hope, things get better. And so I was just curious. I wanted to ask you if your job as a firefighter, has it ever reflected maybe any of your experiences or anything like that in the book? Like, is there any connections with your characters or the story?
Well, so in the ill-advised stories, some of the short stories do make references to the father being a firefighter and doing silly things like eating peanut butter in the middle of the night. There's a story called the Peanut Butter Monster, which was literally about, like, because we work such weird shifts that you're sleep deprived a lot of the time. But the whole plot of the story was basically the dad keeps getting up in the middle of the night and eating peanut butter, and the kids in the house thought they had a monster in there because the peanut butter kept disappearing, which which was almost a true story, except for the part where they attack him in the middle of the night. So there's that. But also, the next project that I'm working on the third book in the science fiction series, but I'm also actually working on a picture book at the same time. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
starting to do some of the character drawings, and that's actually going to be a fire safety book. So I'm hoping that'll give me an opportunity to go into a few schools and talk about fire safety, and it'll also hopefully be a funny picture book for kids to read. As far as the more serious aspects of my job, because obviously, when you're a firefighter, you see horrible things, and it when I write my fiction, I try to put that aside. Like that's sort of an escape, like writing science fiction and going to foreign world, to alien worlds and stuff like that. That's sort of how I avoid thinking too
Mm-hmm.
much about the things that I see in my job. You know, certainly,
Right.
certainly when I wrote this one, the Adventures of Sparky and Spazzoid, that was literally to make myself laugh. I basically said, you know, how what are my favorite things that I would like to see in a book, and I'm a big fan of Calvin and Hobbes, the comic strip. So I was looking at
Mm-hmm.
my Calvin and Hobbes book, and that's sort of like when I have to deal with things that are, you know, bad for the job. That's kind of what I dive back into is childish things.
Mm-hmm.
So writing a boy space explorer with a cranky robot friend, it was a lot of fun for me. It was the way to get away from it.
Mm-hmm.
I keep thinking that
Right.
I want to write a young adult fire department book, because so like one of the largest things a lot of people don't realize, because like on the East Coast and on the West Coast of America, you have the paid
Mm-hmm.
fire departments because it's packed so much
Mm-hmm.
tighter. You have to have paid departments. But in the middle of America and in a lot of small communities, you have volunteer firefighters, which, you know,
Mm-hmm.
most of these communities you have to be 18 to be a volunteer firefighter. But for some people, they
Mm-hmm.
want to get getting on the trucks younger than that. And like,
Mm-hmm.
it's one of those things to where it's like, so if you're a firefighter in New York, you're going to see the same things that somebody in a small town sees. You're going to see opiate abuse. You're going to see fires. You're going to see horrible things. You're just going to see way more of it because you're in a big city. But small communities
Mm-hmm.
deal with these things too. And some of these kids that go out and volunteer, they see these things at a very young age, you know? And so I always
Mm-hmm.
thought that would be an interesting story to explore in a novel. Some of the kids that go out and dedicate their time to the fire service and helping their communities, you know, because I think it's important that
Mm-hmm.
kids still do it, but I think, you know, people don't think about those young people that do that. They go out and serve their communities. So someday I'll
Mm-hmm.
write.
Right. Right. Fantastic. And your family and your wife, I mean, like your family, how have they been responding to your work and your wife and your like apart from your family, your children and your wife, are there anybody else who read your work, and what is it like so far for you? But I think as a writer, the support that you get from your immediate close loved one is really kind of like important. So tell us a little bit about that.
So I'm very lucky in that my dad is a big reader, and he always has been. And he was always my first reader for any of my short stories when I was younger. He was always willing to read it. And actually, it's funny because I'm dyslexic, so I had a hard time learning to read. But I always liked telling stories ever since I was a kid. So even when I was little and I'd wanted to tell a story, my dad was nice enough to type them out for me. So I would tell him the story,
Mhm.
I would dictate them to my dad, and then he would write them down, which was great, you know. I'm also very lucky in that because I'm Irish, the Irish Catholic thing
Mhm.
in America is like it's kind of a comedy because like we had very large families. So I have a lot of cousins. My mom was one of nine, so I have about 21
Mhm.
first cousins. So when I
Mhm.
had like a book launch or something like that, they all showed up, and it made it a much bigger event because your family comes out and supports you. You know, so having a big
Mhm.
family
Mhm.
for that, you know. They're all very supportive. They read the books, and you know I hope they enjoy them. So
Fantastic. I mean, so before we actually end the show, do you have anything to tell the audience out there who are watching this and those who would be watching this later on? Would you like to say anything to them?
sure. So if you want to see what I'm doing as far as the picture book goes, I'm going to put up some of my sketches on Instagram. For Sparky and Spazzoid, I was also doing a web comic. a webtoon that was going up, like a 4-panel one, but I kind of let it go so I can pursue the picture book. But like I said, a lot of the sketches are lined up on Instagram. The second book of Sparky and Spazzoid is already completed. It's in the first draft, so I just have to edit that, and then that'll be part of the podcast as well, hopefully in the fall. I'm also hoping that the third book will be out by the fall, but the science fiction series. So hopefully they can pick that up and pick up the free copy, see if they like it, and if they like it, then I hope they'll read the second one.
Awesome, right, fantastic. And I think you really have a great website, and it is complete with a lot of crucial information. And yeah, so that this is what we are seeing over here. So I believe that your readers can actually get to know you further, and pretty much learn everything about your work over here. So it's very complete, and they can also get in touch with you through the mailing list and social media accounts over here: Twitter, Facebook, and also Instagram. Yeah, and so with that, we have come close to the end of the show. Thank you so much for actually joining today's show. It was a great pleasure having you today and to talk about your books, your characters, and how you read your stories. And it was really interesting to talk to you today. And I hope that those who are watching this right now, and also those who will catch up with this later on, they will enjoy watching this interview and also getting to know you a little bit further. And with that, I will also be posting this up on Instagram, and I will tag you. And I will also be putting this up on YouTube as well. So we hope that you get wider coverage. We hope that people will be able to reach out to you. And so with that, we've come close to the end of the show today. Thank you so much for joining, and for elaborating more about your work and yourself as a writer. It was really fun to talk to you today. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed this.
Thank you. Thank you. And I will be putting the links up on Instagram and also YouTube. I'll be sending them across to you, and once this is over, it will be available for playback immediately on Facebook. So those on Facebook, they can actually go and watch this anytime. So that's going to be available for playback real soon after it's over. And that one on Facebook and the one on YouTube and Instagram, I will be uploading that soon, and I'll be sending you the links in a bit.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, and have a great day. Have a great day. Thank you so much.